I was 68 years old the night my phone would not stop buzzing. 3 separate alerts lit up the screen as I sat alone at my kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm tea beside me, and my cufflinks still in the box. The first alert was small, almost laughable, $3 for a parking meter. The second was heavier, nearly crushing, $17,800 pushed toward the final catering bill. The third froze my breath. A wire attempt of $2 million had been blocked. All 3 transactions were tied to accounts under my name. I leaned back, staring at the grain of the old oak table. That table had carried the weight of birthdays and Christmas dinners long before my daughter had gone looking for the woman who gave her life. Now, with her real mother seated at the head of every new gathering, I had become something less than family, yet still expected to bankroll the dream. The rehearsal dinner for the wedding was in full swing at a converted barn up in the Hudson Valley. I had been erased from the guest list a week ago. My daughter told me gently that her real dad would walk her down the aisle. She said it with a kind of softness that made it cut deeper, like a sharp blade hidden in velvet. What she did not know was that I saw the leaked group chat the bridesmaids shared. Someone forwarded me the screenshots, maybe by accident, maybe out of pity. One line kept echoing, "He is just the man who raised her. Letting him pay is the least he can do." That sentence wrapped around my chest tighter than any tie. I sat in silence, the kind that weighs more than noise. Outside, the September evening pressed against the windows, heavy and gray. The Ring camera at my front porch blinked, capturing nothing but stillness. I could hear faint laughter from the house next door, the neighbors talking about fall decorations and homeowners association bylaws. Normal life went on while mine tilted towards something darker. I looked at the envelope on the table, stamped and notarized, holding the codicil I had prepared weeks earlier. My hand rested on it like a soldier on his rifle. I had not mailed it yet. I was waiting for the right moment. You see, money is not just money when it sits inside a trust. It becomes leverage, memory, power, and punishment depending on who holds the key. I had created that trust when my wife was still alive to secure our daughter's future. It was meant to open doors, not close them on me. Now the rehearsal dinner echoed in my imagination, clinking glasses, polite laughter, my name scratched out of the seating chart. Somewhere in that barn, the woman who once abandoned her child was smiling as if she had carried the weight all these years. And my daughter, the same girl who once asked me to read bedtime stories twice in a row, was letting her. I held the phone again, scrolling through the bank alerts. $3, $17,800, $2 million. A ladder of betrayal, each rung sharper than the last. In that quiet kitchen, I thought of something my wife used to say whenever the family argued about money. Respect costs nothing, but without it, every dollar feels stolen. She had been right. Tonight I felt robbed. Not just of cash, but of fatherhood itself. Still, I stayed calm. At my age, rage is wasted fuel. Better to keep the flame steady, low controlled. Silent power has longer reach. I folded the envelope back into the drawer. The sound of wood sliding shut was the only applause I needed. I whispered to the empty room. Not yet, but soon. Because what they did not know was that I had changed the locks on the safe 2 weeks earlier. The keys in their pockets would open nothing. The cards they tried to swipe would decline in public. And the trust they leaned on would not move a dime until I decided it should. I sipped the cold tea and smiled. But what they didn't know was, the real rehearsal was about to begin. If your child blocked you from their wedding but still tried to spend your money, what would you do? Pay or pause? Comment pay or pause. And tell me where you're watching from. We need to talk about families and money. When you reach my age, you learn to stop pretending that family dinners are about food. They are audits, emotional and financial, disguised with napkins and laughter. For decades, I played my role, husband, father, provider. After my wife passed, that role sharpened into something more rigid, the man who keeps things afloat. I built a life in Greenwich, Connecticut. My work as an architect left its marks across the county libraries, schools, a civic center, where I once stood proud while my daughter cut the ribbon. The neighbors know me as the man who served a term on the homeowners association, the one who argued about lawn ordinances and noise complaints. It sounds trivial, but in those HOA minutes, I learned how rules shape power. Now, sitting in the quiet of my own house, I felt the same dynamics playing out inside my family. My daughter, grown and glowing, had opened the door to her birth mother. That woman returned not with humility, but with an appetite. Together they drew up their own charter, a new hierarchy where I was relegated to sponsor instead of father. The evidence was everywhere. An email from the wedding planner, accidentally copied to me, carried a tone both polite and presumptive. If the groom's family cannot cover the outstanding balance, perhaps Mr. Keene will transfer the remainder. He has always been generous. My name reduced to a line item. Then came the video feed from my own Ring camera. One Friday afternoon while I was out walking to the post office, it caught my daughter and her mother standing at the porch. The older woman gestured toward the mailbox, whispering, "Try his card first. He always keeps it easy." My daughter hesitated, then laughed nervously. They never knew the lens was recording every word. The neighbors on next door had begun whispering too. Someone posted about an upcoming wedding that would shut down the main road for hours. Replies came fast questions about permits, parking, fire safety. I read them in silence, aware that the community saw my property as the stage, though I had never agreed to host the act. It reminded me of something from long ago when my daughter was 12. She begged for a summer camp. Money was tight that year, so I told her we would wait. She screamed, "You are not my real dad." It stung, but I let it pass. Years later, that phrase had returned weaponized by adults around her who knew its sting better than she did. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt a clarity that comes only with age. They believed love and loyalty could be rerouted like utilities cut from one provider and switched to another. What they did not see was that the infrastructure still ran through me. The trust, the deeds, the power of attorney, the simple matter of whose name sat on the county clerk's records. So I let them plan. I let them print invitations with fonts that curled like vines, promising champagne toasts and riverside sunsets. I let them discuss menus that reached $17,800 before gratuity, and I let them believe they had my silent consent. Inside, though, I was stacking bricks of resolve just as I once sketched walls on blueprints. My wife had taught me the difference between kindness and indulgence. "If you give without respect, you are not giving, you are feeding resentment," she once said. She had a way of cutting to the bone. Tonight, her words echoed louder than any rehearsal toast. I checked the family group chat, the one I had been quietly removed from months ago. But screenshots still found their way to me. One message from her birth mother read, "Do not worry about costs. Harland will cover it like always." Another from a bridesmaid, "Why invite him if the check clears without his plate at the table?" I read them twice, not for pain but for proof. Every betrayal leaves a paper trail. That night, I walked through my study, pausing at the safe I had moved into a corner after my wife died. Inside were folders with deeds, trust documents, and that codicil waiting for ink. I slid my fingers over the cool steel, then over the new keys on my chain. The locks had been changed. No one else could open it now. I thought of my daughter's smile when she was small, how she used to run to the drafting table and trace my sketches with her tiny hand. Somewhere beneath the layers of manipulation, that child still existed. But the woman preparing to say "I do" seemed to have misplaced her father. It hurt, yes. But hurt is fuel if you keep it steady. The email, the video clip, the group chat, all were bricks in the foundation of what was coming. A foundation stronger than their rehearsals, their laughter, their assumptions. Because family can cut you deeper than strangers, and money, when mishandled, sharpens every blade. But the blueprint I had drawn was about to change the structure entirely. When a man passes 60, he ought to have his affairs in order. I had done just that. The trust, the deeds, the powers of attorney, each document had been drafted years earlier with the help of a careful lawyer in town. My wife and I had agreed that clarity prevented quarrels. Still, grief and time had a way of blurring lines. When my daughter brought her birth mother back into the circle, those lines blurred to the point of vanishing. So I sat in my study with the lamp casting a yellow cone across the papers, reading through them one by one. Each page was a tool, each clause a brick in the wall I needed to rebuild. The revocable trust carried my signature and my late wife's. It held the family house, the cabin by the lake, and investments that had grown quietly over decades. It had been designed for smooth passage, avoiding probate. But I saw now how it could be reshaped into leverage. I penciled a note to add a condition distributions tied not to age but to respect and conduct. A simple codicil could do that. The power of attorney had once allowed my daughter limited access when she was in college, just enough to pay tuition and rent while she studied. I had left it active out of habit. That was a mistake. Tonight I marked it for revocation. No more open door. Then there was the matter of the escrow account tied to the wedding venue. $17,800 sat in limbo, my money committed, but not yet released. One call to the bank placed a freeze. The manager confirmed with a solemn tone, sending me a receipt by email. I printed it, folded it, and slipped it into my breast pocket. Paper has a way of speaking louder than words. The quitclaim deed was the sharpest tool. Weeks earlier, I had transferred the Hudson Valley property into a limited liability company, structured so that I held 51% control. That majority meant I could dictate who stayed there, who walked its floors, who used its smart locks. I had filed it with the county clerk. The stamped copy bore witness. I remembered standing in that office, the clerk sliding the papers back with a nod, the stamp still wet. Once recorded, she said, "No one can claim without your consent." Her words were dry procedure, but to me they rang like a hymn. Even the old truck I had co-signed for my daughter years ago could be shielded. A lien rested quietly on the title. I prayed I would never need to enforce it, but its presence was a reminder generosity carries receipts. I closed the folder and locked it again. The safe clicked, shut, a sound both final and reassuring. These were not acts of revenge. They were measures of balance. My wife had always told me, money is not punishment, it is boundary. Boundaries keep gardens from becoming wilderness houses, from falling to ruin families from devouring each other. Still, there was a sting. Each step I took to protect myself felt like stepping further from the daughter I had raised. Yet the alternative, silence and surrender, would erase me entirely. I poured a glass of water and sat in the quiet. Outside, the HOA sent another notice by email. A neighbor had painted shutters the wrong color. Trivial to most, but I smiled at the reminder. Rules matter even in small things, especially in small things. As the clock passed midnight, I thought of the rehearsal dinner scheduled for the next evening. The barn would glow with string lights, laughter, the scent of roasted lamb. My chair would be empty by design, but my presence would arrive in another form: documents, freezes, deeds. They had written me out of the program. What they did not know was that I still owned the stage. But the biggest change was hidden in one codicil they had not seen. The rehearsal dinner had the charm of a postcard: twinkling string lights strung across wooden beams, polished wine glasses catching the glow, and a band in the corner, playing songs soft enough to let conversations layer over them. To anyone walking in from the gravel parking lot, it looked like a celebration carved from the pages of a lifestyle magazine. But I walked in carrying something heavier than joy. Inside my jacket pocket, folded 3 times, was the escrow freeze confirmation. In the other pocket rested the quitclaim deed stamped by the county clerk. And on my phone, still glowing with the bank's alert, was the attempt to move $2 million out of the trust. The planner spotted me first. She hesitated, perhaps recalling that my name still stood on the contract. "Mr. Keene," she whispered, "I wasn't sure if you would come." I was invited once I answered. That invitation may have been revoked, but the invoices still carry my name. Eyes followed me as I stepped farther into the barn. My daughter turned radiant in her dress for the rehearsal, and for a fleeting second I saw the child who used to tug my sleeve during bedtime stories. Then her birth mother appeared beside her, chin lifted, smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Harland," she said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "I thought we agreed you would sit this one out." I reached into my jacket and laid the folded paper on the nearest table. The planner, pale now, unfolded it with trembling hands. The bold letters spoke louder than I ever could: escrow hold payment frozen pending authorization. A silence spread wider than any toast could have. Guests craned their necks. The band slowed to a confused halt. My daughter's cheeks flushed red, whether from anger or shame I could not tell. The birth mother broke it first. "This is petty," she hissed. "You would humiliate her on the eve of her wedding." I stayed calm. I would not humiliate anyone. But I will not finance my own erasure. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Another bank alert flashed across the screen, this time showing a declined attempt from the supplemental card I had already revoked. I held it up without a word, letting the glow light my face in the dim barn. Gasps rippled like wind through dry leaves. From the far end of the room, someone projected a slideshow meant for nostalgia photos of the couple from childhood to now. But instead of laughter, the screen lit up with an image that should never have been there, a screenshot of the bridesmaids' chat. Words in bold letters filled the wall: "Let him pay. That's all he is good for." I had not arranged that particular leak. Someone else had slipped it in. Perhaps a friend of conscience, perhaps a relative tired of the charade. But there it was, glaring down at every guest. My daughter's groom shifted uncomfortably, whispering in her ear. She pulled back, tears brimming, though pride stiffened her shoulders. I spoke softly, but the room carried my voice. "I will not shout. I will not beg. But understand, this $17,800 will not leave my account without respect. $2 million will not move without trust. And $3 for a parking meter that was the price of the first alert tonight already told me enough." The birth mother's smile faltered. She tried to raise her glass, but her hand shook. The planner lowered hers, looking as if she wanted to melt into the floorboards. Then I pressed the final key. From my pocket, I withdrew the deed recorded under the LLC. As of last week, I said the property listed for your honeymoon stay is no longer available to you. It belongs to an entity where I hold 51% control. That means I decide who holds the keys. Someone gasped aloud. The band set down their instruments altogether. It was not rage in me, it was clarity. At 68, you learn the power of stillness. I simply folded the documents again, tucked them away, and added, "You may toast without me, but you will pay without me too." The silence that followed was the truest sound of the evening. One of them tried to swipe my old card that night, but that story belongs to the next chapter. The morning after the rehearsal, I sat in my lawyer's office, the codicil draft spread across the polished mahogany desk. Outside, the September air was brisk, and through the window I could see leaves beginning to blush red. Inside, though, the room carried the sterile chill of legal consequence. The lawyer, a woman younger than my own daughter, tapped her pen lightly against the margin. "We can tighten this clause," she said. "Distribution from the trust will depend on demonstrated respect and boundary compliance. Those words have weight in probate. The court will honor them." I nodded. "Make it plain. I am not cutting her out, but I am not leaving the vault wide open either." By noon, the codicil bore both my signature and the notary's stamp. That sharp thud of ink on paper felt like a gavel in a courtroom. I slid my copy into a folder and carried it out with me, the weight heavier than any stone. Later that afternoon, I visited the county clerk. The quitclaim deed for the Hudson Valley property had already been recorded, but I requested an official search receipt to confirm the LLC structure. The clerk handed me the stamped copy, the black ink still damp. "Here you go, Mr. Keene. It's in the books. No one can challenge this without your consent." I thanked her, walked out, and immediately scanned the receipt into an email. I copied the planner, the venue, and both families. No sharp words, no accusations, only the facts. Property transferred, LLC majority control retained, access restricted. That evening, the wedding planner called me in a panic. "Harland, please. Without that escrow, we cannot move forward. Vendors are demanding assurance." "Vendors," I repeated quietly. I was treated as one too. And vendors get paid or they walk away. There was silence on the line before she murmured, "I understand." Meanwhile, the group chat continued to leak. Screenshots reached me from anonymous numbers. The birth mother's fury spilled across the screen. "He humiliated us in front of everyone." "Who freezes a payment in public?" a bridesmaid replied with a laughing emoji. Another chimed in, "Maybe he finally grew a spine." The irony was not lost on me. Silent power looks like weakness until it stands. By Sunday morning, the ripple effects were visible. The wedding package had been downgraded. Champagne replaced with Prosecco filet swapped for chicken. Guests whispered, though none dared confront me directly. My daughter left me a voicemail that night. Her voice trembled. "Dad, I don't know what to say. I thought you would always just cover things. I was wrong. I need time to think." I listened twice, not for apology but for awareness. Awareness was enough for now. The following week, I mailed copies of the codicil to the appropriate offices. My lawyer confirmed receipt. The trust was no longer blind generosity. It was a gate with conditions. To open it, one needed not just a name but an attitude. Some might call it revenge. I called it restoration. In my garden that evening, I watched the sun sink behind the trees, the air smelling of soil and fallen leaves. My wife had always loved autumn. She used to say, "It is the season that teaches dignity. Everything falls, but with color." I thought of that as I clipped away dead branches. I had clipped away something else too. Not love for my daughter, never that, but entitlement, the kind that rots a tree from within. They had thought I was powerless. What they did not know was that power is not in shouting or spending. It is in the quiet reshaping of documents, the ink of a notary, the stamp of a clerk, the freeze of a bank account. And while they scrambled to patch holes in their celebration, I stood firm, steady as the oak outside my window. But I still had one more move, one more door to close before the vows were spoken. The wedding day dawned crisp and cloudless, the kind of September morning that photographers dream about. The barn looked almost identical to how it had the night before, white lights looping across rafters, flowers perched in vases that strained to look fuller than they were. But beneath the pretty wrapping, there was hollowness. You can't freeze a foundation without the cracks showing. I arrived later than most by design. I wasn't on the program yet, my name still lived on contracts. When I stepped through the doorway, heads turned, whispers surfacing like ripples in a pond. I didn't raise a hand. I didn't need to. I had already spoken in the only language that mattered. Contracts, receipts, and the county clerk's stamp. The ceremony moved forward, though trimmed. The string quartet had been replaced by a lone violinist, the wine bottles poured with a stingier hand. A few guests muttered about the switch. I heard one relative of the groom say under her breath, "Budget cuts, perhaps." Another guest, unaware of the iceberg beneath, laughed politely. My daughter stood radiant at the altar, yet even from my seat near the back I saw her jaw tighten. Weddings are supposed to float on joy, but hers carried the weight of ledgers and frozen accounts. When the officiant asked if anyone had cause to object, I said nothing. This was not my battle to fight. Love, or what she believed to be love, was hers to choose. What I withheld was not affection, but funding. During the reception, the tension hung thicker. The bride's mother raised a glass and said, "Family is about showing up." Her eyes flicked toward me. The words were meant to sting. I simply sipped water steady as stone. Halfway through dinner, another tremor arrived. The payment terminal at the bar declined a card, hers the supplemental card that no longer worked. The bartender looked confused. The screen glowed red. Guests near the bar caught on quickly. Murmurs spread like wildfire. I did not smile, but I also did not flinch. Boundaries once set do not bend. Later that evening, my daughter slipped away from the crowd and left me a message. Her voice cracked. "Dad, I see it now. I see what you meant. I thought you'd never stand up. I thought money just flowed. I was wrong. I don't know how to fix this yet, but I know I have to try." That message played in my pocket while the band struck up their final song. To the others, it was just another night of awkward celebration, champagne and plastic flutes instead of crystal and speeches that rang thin. But to me, it was the turning of a tide. As I walked out into the cool night, the stars sharp above, I thought of my wife again. She once told me, "Children test fences. Parents build them higher, not out of spite, but out of love." That night, I felt her hand on my shoulder, though she was long gone. The wedding carried on without my wallet. My absence at the head table spoke louder than any toast. Respect had a price. They were beginning to learn it. But boundaries once enforced leave echoes, and mine were about to echo even louder. The Monday after the wedding, my house phone rang just after sunrise. Few people use landlines anymore, but I keep mine. It feels solid, unchanging, like the tick of a grandfather clock. The voice on the other end was brittle, almost breaking. It was my daughter. "Dad," she said, "I can't pretend anymore. Things spiraled. People are talking. I don't even know where to begin." I listened, letting her spill the fragments, vendors demanding payment whispers across both families, the groom's parents wondering why the bill hadn't been settled. Every echo of her choices now returned to her. By midweek, the fallout spread. The wedding planner, once smug, now sent polite apologies laced with desperation. "Mr. Keene, the balance remains unsettled." "Could you reconsider?" I replied with a single sentence. "Respect first, then payment." Nothing more. Screenshots found their way to me again. A bridesmaid had posted on social media about the wedding freeze, calling it a scandal. Within hours, comments flooded in, half mocking, half sympathetic. One stranger wrote, "If he raised her and they erased him, why should he pay? Stand strong, sir." Another jeered, "Imagine losing millions over pride." That line made me chuckle. Pride to them looked like stubbornness. To me, it was survival. Neighbors on Nextdoor whispered too. Someone posted about the wedding with frozen funds and how it had disrupted traffic. Replies came fast. One person praised me for not caving, another scoffed that old men with money always want control. I didn't respond. Silent power travels farther when left unspoken. Midweek, an email arrived from the county clerk, confirmation that the codicil had been properly recorded. Attached was a digital copy stamped and archived. I forwarded it to myself twice, storing it in different folders as if double-locking a vault. On Friday evening, I drove to the cabin by the lake. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine. I unlocked the door with my own key. No one else had one anymore. Inside, the silence greeted me like an old friend. I poured a small glass of bourbon, set the folder of documents on the table, and let the quiet speak. My daughter's voicemail replayed in my head. "I thought you'd never stand up." That was the line that stayed with me. Children often mistake silence for weakness. They learn only later that silence can be armor, and when broken, it reveals steel. I did not hate her. I hated the entitlement that had taken root around her, watered by people who saw my years of care as a blank check. Entitlement is a weed. It grows fast, choking the soil. But cut it back, and sometimes, just sometimes, the garden breathes again. That weekend, the birth mother tried one last maneuver. She called me directly. "You embarrassed us," she spat. "Do you know what people are saying?" I let the pause stretch before answering. "I know what the bank is saying. I know what the county clerk stamped, and I know what respect sounds like when it's missing. That's all I need." She hung up without another word. As night fell at the cabin, I lit the fireplace and sat in its glow. The flames cracked. The bourbon warmed my chest, and the folder of deeds and codicils sat within reach. Power did not roar, it whispered. But even whispers can echo through generations, and mine were only beginning to be heard. Autumn deepened in Greenwich, the leaves turning amber and gold. Weeks had passed since the wedding, but the echoes still lingered. Some relatives avoided me altogether. Others wrote awkward notes about misunderstandings. None of it mattered. I had drawn the line, and the line held. One evening, as the streetlights flickered on, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was my daughter again. Her voice was steadier this time. "Dad, I know now what I allowed. I see how I let her speak for me, how I let her erase you. I thought money was endless, that love meant never saying no. I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive overnight. But I want to try again with respect." I sat in my study listening twice, then a third time. Her words did not heal every wound, but they were a step. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates that open only when approached with care. That same week, the lawyer confirmed the trust amendments were ironclad. "The codicil is in place," she said. "Distributions tied to conduct enforceable in probate. No one can touch those funds without honoring your conditions." The notary's stamp and clerk's receipt were more than ink, they were shields. The birth mother, I later heard, had drifted to the margins once more. Without control of the accounts, her influence shrank quickly. She had no deeds, no codicils, no keys. As for me, I settled into quieter rhythms. Mornings walking to the post office, evenings tending the garden. The HOA still sent its trivial notices. Someone painted shutters, the wrong shade of blue. Someone else forgot trash bins at the curb. It made me smile. Rules, even small ones, keep order. Families are no different. At the lake cabin, I kept the firewood stacked high. One Saturday, I stood on the deck as geese flew overhead, their calls cutting across the sky. I thought of my wife, of her steady voice reminding me that love without respect is erosion. I thought of my daughter as a child, her small hand tracing my architectural sketches. And I thought of the woman she had nearly become, lost to entitlement, nearly but not fully. Because somewhere between the frozen escrow and the voicemail apology, she began to see. In the end, it was not about the $17,800 or the attempt to drain $2 Bay million or even the $3 parking meter. It was about dignity. Without it, every dollar feels stolen. With it, even silence feels rich. I poured myself a cup of coffee, strong and dark, and leaned back in the chair. Through the window, the sun set slow, painting the sky in strokes of orange. I spoke aloud, though no one else was there. "I am a father, not an endless account. Love is not a debit card. Respect is the only currency that holds." The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that steadies a man. If you think setting a trust boundary was the right move, comment right. If you have a better idea of what I should have done at that rehearsal dinner, share it below.